People rarely notice me when I'm in a room. It's not because I do anything wrong, I just don't stand out. I've always been quiet, predictable, the kind of person who blends into the background without trying. My name is Leo. I'm 29 and I work as a network technician for a logistics company on the north side of Portland. It's not a job anyone dreams about growing up, but it's steady and it's enough. As long as I do what I'm supposed to, everything keeps running smoothly. I usually get to the office before anyone else. The building feels different that early, still, almost hollow. I pour myself a cup of black coffee that tastes harsher than it should and start my day. Most of my time is spent above ceiling panels, pulling cables through tight spaces, or explaining simple technical problems to people who never remember the answers anyway. It's repetitive, but I don't mind. There's something reassuring about knowing exactly what needs to be done. My desk sits in the far corner of the second floor, tucked beside a tall rack of servers. They run constantly, filling the space with a low, steady hum. It reminds me of a heartbeat, quiet, consistent, dependable. I've grown used to that sound over the years, maybe even dependent on it. It fills the silence so I don't have to. For a long time, that kind of life suited me perfectly. No surprises, no pressure, no one expecting more from me than I was willing to give. I stayed in my lane, fixed what broke, and kept things simple. And then, one day, that simplicity started to change. I didn't actually see her on her first day. If Max hadn't shown up, I probably wouldn't have known anything had changed at all. It was late morning when he appeared beside my desk, the way he always does when he has something he's been waiting to tell someone. Max has this energy about him, like silence physically bothers him if he's holding onto information for too long. He leaned against the server rack, glancing around before lowering his voice. "There's someone new in sales," he said. "Elena started today." I kept my eyes on my screen, scrolling through system logs. Okay. He paused, clearly expecting more. When he didn't get it, he pushed on anyway. "She corrected Greg during onboarding, right in the middle of the meeting. Not rude or anything, but still bold." That made me glance up for a second. Greg wasn't the kind of person people usually corrected, especially not on their first day. "Good for her," I said, then went back to what I was doing. Max stayed there a moment longer, like he was waiting for a reaction that never came. Eventually, he straightened up and shrugged. "Yeah, I guess," he muttered, before walking off to find someone else who would appreciate the story more. I didn't think about it again after that. People came and went all the time in offices like ours. New faces, new names, most of them faded into the background within a week or two, just part of the routine. At least that's what I believed back then. 2 days later, I heard the coffee machine before I saw her. I was walking past the break area with a coil of network cable over my shoulder when a sharp, repetitive beeping cut through the hallway. It was loud enough to make anyone stop, the kind of sound that instantly gets under your skin. I hesitated for a second, then stepped inside. She was standing in front of the machine with her arms crossed, staring at it like it had personally offended her. Up close, she looked different than I expected, more focused somehow. Her dark hair was shorter on the sides, with soft curls on top that didn't quite stay in place. She wore a charcoal blazer with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and her glasses had thick frames that made her expression seem sharper, more deliberate. She tapped the touchscreen again. The machine answered with an even louder protest. Under her breath, she muttered something I didn't quite catch. I set the cable down and walked over without thinking too much about it. Reaching past her, I pulled the water reservoir out slightly, then pushed it back in until it clicked into place. The beeping stopped instantly. A second later, the machine came back to life, humming as it started brewing. She turned toward me, her expression shifting from irritation to something calmer, more curious. "Thanks," she said. "It gets stuck sometimes," I replied. "You have to push it in harder than you expect." Instead of giving me the quick, polite glance most people do, she studied me for a moment, like she was actually paying attention. "You work on this floor?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, nodding toward the hallway. "Network team, end of the corridor." She adjusted her grip on the coffee cup, then held out her hand slightly. "Elena." "Leo." A small, almost subtle smile appeared on her face. "Nice to meet you, Leo." She poured her coffee, black, and stepped away, leaving the room as quietly as she had filled it. The whole exchange couldn't have lasted more than a minute. Still, after she was gone, I didn't move right away. I stood there for a few extra seconds, staring at the machine as if something about the moment hadn't quite made sense. My pulse felt a little faster than usual. I picked up the cable again and went back to work, telling myself it didn't mean anything. After that, we started running into each other more often. At first it felt like coincidence. The stairwell in the mornings, the printer that jammed almost daily, the vending machine that refused to accept dollar bills unless you fed it the same 1-3 times. Small places, small moments, nothing that meant anything. We kept it simple, a nod, a quick hey, a few words exchanged in passing. One afternoon, I was crouched beside the office printer, pulling out a crumpled sheet someone had forced through the rollers. I could feel her standing nearby before I even looked up. "You fix this thing a lot?" she asked. "More than I should have to," I said, straightening the paper. She leaned lightly against the wall, watching. "Do you ever get tired of being the one who knows how everything works?" I paused for a second, then shrugged. Better than being the one who doesn't. That earned a quiet laugh from her, soft but real. It lingered in my head longer than I expected, even after I went back to work. After that, the conversations didn't stop, but they changed. They lasted a little longer each time. A question here, a comment there, nothing obvious, nothing anyone else would notice. But it was enough. She asked things most people never did. Why I liked working with machines. Why I stayed quiet during meetings even when I clearly knew the answers. Why I seemed so comfortable staying in the background. I didn't plan to answer honestly, I just did. Maybe it was the way she listened. Not rushing, not interrupting, not trying to fill every silence. With her, the pauses didn't feel awkward. They felt allowed. Weeks passed like that. Nothing dramatic. No big moments. Just small conversations, shared looks, and a kind of understanding that didn't need to be explained. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just routine, just two co-workers being polite. But the truth was harder to ignore. The office didn't feel as quiet anymore. That changed on a Thursday night. The whole week had been draining. 2 servers on the 4th floor kept crashing without any clear pattern, and the error logs only made sense after hours of digging. I spent most of my time under desks, tracing cables and checking connections, while the rest of the office slowly emptied out. By the time I finally closed the last support ticket, it was 8:47 p.m. The building felt different at that hour. The lights had dimmed, the usual noise replaced by long stretches of silence. Somewhere in the distance, a vacuum hummed faintly, cleaning staff finishing their rounds. Otherwise, it was just empty hallways and the quiet echo of my own footsteps. I shut down my workstation, grabbed my jacket, and headed outside. Cold October air hit me immediately. The parking lot was still wet from the afternoon rain, and the streetlights reflected in scattered puddles across the asphalt. My car sat where it always did, near the back fence. I was halfway there when I noticed someone standing by an open hood. It was Elena. She stood beside a dark blue car, her phone in one hand and a small flashlight in the other, shining it into the engine. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders. I slowed down. I could have kept walking. My car was only a few steps away, but something pulled me toward her before I had time to think about it. "Need help?" I asked as I got closer. She looked up quickly, and the shift in her expression was immediate, relief replacing frustration. "Yes," she said, exhaling. "Please." I stepped beside her and looked under the hood. It didn't take long to figure it out. The alternator belt was worn down, frayed at the edges, barely holding together. "It's about to snap," I said. She let out a quiet breath, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. "Of course it is." "I can fix it enough to get you home," I told her, "but you'll want a proper repair tomorrow." She nodded without hesitation. That would help a lot. I walked back to my car, grabbed a small toolkit from the trunk, and returned. The parking lot was quiet except for the faint sound of wind and the occasional click of metal tools in my hands. She stood nearby, watching, but she didn't try to fill the silence with unnecessary conversation. That alone set her apart from most people. 15 minutes later, I tightened a temporary fix and lowered the hood. "Try it," I said. She slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine started smoothly, steady and even. She turned it off again and stepped out, closing the door behind her. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "No problem." Neither of us moved. The cold air drifted between us, carrying that quiet stillness the night had settled into. She leaned back lightly against the car, looking up at the sky as if she was searching for something in the clouds. For a moment I thought that was it, that I would say goodnight and walk away. Then she spoke again, so quietly I almost missed it. "I wish you were mine." The words didn't register right away. For a second, it felt like the night itself had paused, like everything around us had gone still just to let them land. I turned toward her slowly. "What did you say?" She looked down almost immediately, like she could take it back if she moved fast enough. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing, we both knew that. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. The yellow glow of the parking lot lights reflected off the wet pavement, softening everything, making it feel slightly unreal. I stepped closer and leaned against the side of the car beside her, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. "I wish that too," I said quietly. As soon as the words left my mouth, something shifted. The air felt different, thicker somehow. She didn't respond right away. Her arms were folded tightly, like she was holding something fragile together inside herself. When she finally turned her head to look at me, it wasn't the same curious glance she gave at the office. This was deeper, careful, almost searching. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said softly. "Why not?" I asked. Her gaze drifted away again. "Because it would make things easier." I frowned slightly. "Easier?" She took a slow breath, like she was deciding how much to say. "You don't know the whole story, Leo." I didn't push. The wind moved across the lot again, rattling the fence behind us. After a moment, she pushed herself away from the car. "I should go." But she didn't move right away. She hesitated, like she was caught between staying and leaving. Then finally, she opened the door and got into the driver's seat. Before closing it, she looked at me one more time. "Thank you for fixing the car." I nodded. "Drive safe." The engine started without a problem. The temporary fix held exactly the way it was supposed to. Her headlights swept across the lot as she pulled away, the light briefly passing over me before disappearing into the dark. I stood there longer than I needed to, watching until the red glow of her taillights vanished around the corner. On the drive home, her words repeated in my head over and over again. "I wish you were mine." I wish that too. Sleep didn't come easily that night. And morning came too soon. I woke up before my alarm, staring at the ceiling while the fan turned slowly above me. The room felt too quiet, like something had shifted overnight and hadn't settled yet. I told myself the same thing over and over. People say things they don't mean late at night. Exhaustion does that. It makes everything feel heavier, more emotional than it really is. By morning it would all fade. It would go back to normal. I almost believed it. Until I walked into the office. Something felt off immediately. The hallway was louder than usual, not busy, just tense. People stood in small groups, talking in low voices, stopping when someone passed by. It wasn't obvious, but it was there. When I reached my desk, Max walked past and slowed down. He glanced at me like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. "What?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Later that morning, I went to the break room to grab some water. 2 people from accounting were standing near the coffee machine, whispering. The moment I stepped in, they went quiet. That's when it clicked. Someone had seen us. Rumors in an office move faster than any network I've ever built. By lunchtime, the story had already changed shape. According to some, we'd been out there for an hour. Others said it looked like we were arguing. One person joked that I was providing after-hours support for sales. I kept my head down and focused on my work, the way I always had. Being invisible used to be an advantage. Now it just felt uncomfortable. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. A calendar notification appeared on the screen. Conference Room B, 11:15. The sender, Director of Operations. A slight tension settled in my chest. When I walked into the room, Mr. Harland was already seated at the table. He folded his hands calmly. "Leo," he said, "close the door." I did, then took a seat across from him. He didn't waste time. "There's been some talk around the office." I stayed quiet. "People say they saw you and Alina from sales together in the parking lot last night." "I fixed her car," I said. Her alternator belt was about to snap. He watched me for a moment, then nodded. That's what I assumed. He leaned back slightly. I'm not accusing you of anything, but perception matters in a workplace like this. I just want you to be mindful of professional boundaries. I understand. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. When I stepped back into the hallway, Elena was standing near the far end, arms folded, her posture tense. What happened? She asked quietly. Nothing serious, I said, just a reminder about boundaries. Her shoulders dropped a little. I'm sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. She looked down. I shouldn't have said what I said last night. I didn't answer right away. Finally, I said the only thing that felt honest. You didn't make me stay. She looked up at me, and for a moment everything else faded, the hallway, the noise, the people. It felt like we were back in that parking lot again, standing under those dim lights. Then someone called her name from another office. She straightened slightly. I should get back. Yeah, I said. After that, things changed. For the next week we barely spoke. A quick hi in passing, a small nod near the coffee machine, nothing more. It felt like an invisible line had been drawn between us, and we were both trying not to cross it. But distance didn't make it easier. If anything, the silence felt heavier. 8 days passed after that night in the parking lot. Then a message from Elena appeared on my work chat. Room 312, break area now. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, reading the words again even though they didn't change. Then I closed my laptop and headed upstairs. The break room was empty except for her. She sat at a small table near the window, a cup of tea in front of her. She looked tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, something deeper, heavier. When I stepped inside, she looked up, closed the door. I did. For a moment she didn't speak, just sat there gathering her thoughts. There's something you need to know, she said finally. I sat down across from her, my pulse picking up without any clear reason. She took a slow breath. I'm engaged. The words were quiet, but they hit hard. I blinked once. Engaged. She nodded. 8 months. Her fingers rested against the edge of the table, still but tense. His name is Victor. Our families have known each other for years. I didn't interrupt. It wasn't forced, she continued, just expected. A faint, tired smile crossed her face. I thought if I gave it time it would start to feel real. Her eyes dropped to the table. It didn't. The room felt very still. Something else stood out to me then. You don't wear a ring. I don't wear it at work, she said. It feels dishonest. The quiet stretched between us, filled only by the low hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I asked the question that had been building in my chest. Why are you telling me this? She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. Because what I said that night was true. My chest tightened slightly. And you deserve to know everything. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. Outside the window, a delivery truck reversed toward the loading dock, its beeping echoing faintly through the glass. I'm sorry, she said softly. You didn't pull me into anything, I replied. I walked into it myself. Her expression softened. You're a good man, Leo. I stood up slowly. Thanks for telling me. She didn't try to stop me when I left. Back at my desk, I sat in front of my computer for a long time without typing a single word. The servers hummed around me, filling the room with their usual steady noise. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel comforting. It just felt loud. The weeks that followed didn't explode into drama the way you might expect. There were no scenes, no confrontations, just a quiet weight that settled over everything. Elena and I slipped back into something that looked like normal. Polite greetings in the hallway, brief eye contact near the coffee machine, occasional small talk when other people were around. On the surface, it was exactly how things had been before. But it wasn't the same. Every time we passed each other, I remembered that night. The cold air, the dim lights, the way her words had slipped out like she hadn't meant to say them at all. And every time I saw her sitting in meetings or laughing with her team, I reminded myself of the truth she had told me. She was engaged. That line existed whether either of us liked it or not. So I did what I had always done best, I buried it. I focused on work, closed tickets, ran cables, replaced hardware, answered emails, kept my head down and stayed inside the routine that had always felt safe. And for a while it almost worked. Until Thursday afternoon. A calendar notification appeared on my screen. 3:00 p.m, conference room A mandatory. The message came from the assistant of Mrs. Sterling, the regional director. She was the kind of person who didn't need to raise her voice to be taken seriously. If she called a meeting, people showed up. When I walked into the room, Elena was already there. She sat near the far end of the table, her hands folded in her lap, her posture straight but tense. She didn't look at me when I entered. Mrs. Sterling sat at the head of the table, a legal pad in front of her. "Sit down, Leo," she said calmly. I took the seat across from Elena. The door closed behind me with a quiet click. Mrs. Sterling didn't waste time. "I'm going to be direct," she said. "There have been rumors about the two of you." Elena's shoulders tightened slightly, but she didn't speak. "I've already spoken with HR," Mrs. Sterling continued. "There is no complaint, no policy violation." She paused, letting that settle. "But perception matters." Her eyes moved to Elena. "I'd like you to repeat what you told me yesterday." Elena inhaled slowly. "I'm engaged," she said. Hearing it out loud again, in that room, made it feel heavier somehow. "His name is Victor," she continued. "Our families have known each other for years." "It was expected." Mrs. Sterling nodded once. "And how do you feel about that?" Elena's fingers pressed lightly against the table. I thought it would turn into something real over time. She paused. "It didn't." Silence filled the room. Then Mrs. Sterling turned her attention to me. "Lee, you've been here for years, you're reliable, professional, but you also keep yourself hidden." I didn't respond. "There's a difference between being careful and being afraid to live your life," she said. Her words hung there, heavier than anything else she had said. "I'm not here to tell either of you what to do," she added. "Just handle whatever happens with integrity." Elena stood first. "May I go?" Mrs. Sterling nodded. Elena left without looking at me. I stayed seated for a few seconds longer, then stood and moved toward the door. "Leo," Mrs. Sterling said quietly. I stopped. "You're a good man, don't let fear make your choices for you." I nodded once and stepped out into the hallway. The rest of the day passed slowly. We didn't speak. But later that evening, a message appeared on my phone. "Elena, we need to talk." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "I know." 2 days passed without anything else. Then Sunday night came. It was close to 10 when the knock came. Soft but certain. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second I just stood there listening as if the sound might repeat itself. When it didn't, I walked to the door and opened it. Elena stood in the hallway. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. Damp strands of hair clung slightly to her face from the cold night air. She looked tired, but there was something else too, something resolved. "I ended it," she said. The words hung between us. "With Victor," she added quietly, "I ended the engagement." For a moment I didn't know what to say, then I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in slowly, her Verzeger El Yader moving across the room. The couch, the small table stacked with networking books, the single window facing the parking lot. "It's simple," she said. "Yeah," I replied, "but it's quiet." She gave a small nod. "It feels real." She turned toward me again. "I called him today, then I called my parents." Her voice trembled slightly. "They're not taking it well." I didn't interrupt. "They think I'm throwing something important away," she continued. "Maybe I am, but I couldn't keep pretending." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I didn't do it just because of you, Leo." I met her eyes. "I did it because I've been unhappy for a long time. She hesitated. "You reminded me what honesty feels like." The room felt very still. "What do you need right now?" I asked. She seemed surprised by the question, then her expression softened. "Nothing complicated," she said. "I just need someone to sit with me. No fixing, no plans, just stay. I nodded. I can do that. We sat on the couch, not touching at first, just existing in the same space, letting the silence settle around us. After a while she started talking, small things at first, memories from her childhood. Summers spent in her grandfather's workshop, the smell of wood and dust, the sound of tools against old tables. I told her about helping my father rebuild engines when I was younger. Long afternoons that stretched into evenings without us noticing. Time passed without either of us keeping track. When she finally stood near the door, it was already past midnight. She looked at me carefully. What I said that night in the parking lot, I meant it. I nodded. I know. She hesitated, then added quietly, you never said it back. I stepped closer. I'm saying it now. For a second she searched my face, like she needed to be sure. Then she closed the distance between us. The months that followed weren't simple. Ending the engagement created tension with her family. Calls came almost every day, some angry, some disappointed, some filled with a kind of quiet hurt that was harder to face. But she didn't go through it alone. Whenever things became too much, she came over. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we just sat together saying nothing at all. At work we stayed careful, professional. No unnecessary attention, no lingering conversations. But outside of it something steady began to grow. We drove out of the city on weekends, found quiet places where no one knew us, had long dinners where conversations stretched without pressure, walked along the river, talking freely without worrying who might overhear. One evening, she stood in my kitchen, looking around. I like it here, she said softly, it feels real. For the first time in a long while, my apartment didn't feel empty anymore. 4 months later, she made a decision. She started her own consulting firm, a small office downtown with windows facing the river. I helped her build everything from the ground up, setting up networks, installing servers, making sure everything worked the way it should. The day her first client signed, she looked at me with a quiet kind of certainty. This is real now, she said. I smiled, it always was. 2 months later, I made my own decision. I left my job. For years, the steady hum of the server room had been a comfort, something predictable, safe. Now it just felt like something I had outgrown. I joined her company as lead technician. We built it together, slowly, carefully, one step at a time. One late night, we were the only ones left in the office. She leaned against the wall near my desk, watching me work in silence. After a while, she spoke. Softly, without hesitation. I wish you were mine.